Welcome to Lifelong Educators, a community of teachers, of parents, of anyone interested in the future of education. It's new innovations and how we can keep doing it all better and better and better. I'm Jackie Guzda, and I am joined today by my co-host, Josh Chernikoff, Senior Advisor to ClickView, a cohort-based online learning enrichment platform. Good morning, Josh. How are you?
Good. Thank you. How are you?
Great. I'm terrific. And also our very esteemed guest today, Kevin Chavous, an attorney, author, education reform activist, podcast host of I Want to Know, and president of Stride Inc., a company with a mission to help students reach their full potential through inspired teaching and personalized learning. So welcome to you also, Kevin.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie. It's good to be with you and Josh, a true Washingtonian from way back. It's also good to be with you, my friend.
Thank you. It is an honor to share the stage with you.
Thank you.
Hey, and I went to school in DC too and spent 10
That's
years
right.
there. So
There you
I
go.
know, right? Capital.
All roads lead through
Yeah.
the nation.
You were probably there, Jackie, when Kevin was doing his good work in the city, I'm sure. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
I used to be somebody, Jackie. That's what he's trying to say.
oh no, I was honored when I saw your name come up, because you've done such terrific work, Kevin, and you know that's what I want to talk about today. As you know, I'm a college professor, and I'm frustrated with the state of higher ed. And as I was kind of pushing a student along the other day to do better, that student looked at me, smiled, and said, "Hey, please get degrees, ha ha ha." So could you explain to us, please, why the current atmosphere of students in higher ed is satisfied with something like that?
Well, look, I think that we're at an inflection point in this country as it relates to how we interact with each other, how we engage in career selection, how we parent, how we educate our children. And I think the pandemic helped drive that, but also this sort of fusion of technologies, the physical, the digital, and the biological spheres all coming together. The future of human existence is going to be totally different. And I think that we're breaking out of that systematized view of life. I think your conversation with that young person reflects an old way of thinking, that you look at education in a stilted way. Elementary school, middle school, junior high school, college, graduate school, and it's all finite. But I think education of the future, learning of the future, is not finite. It's lifelong learning. It's continuing to stoke that curiosity. So you're not really focused on grades or degrees. You're focused on outputs and your own intake in terms of learning potential. So we're really at a point where things are changing. And I think higher ed is going to have to shake things up, because this idea of, some schools are more elite than others and charging all this money, that's an outdated approach. By the way, a computer programmer who takes a 3 to 6 month boot camp to learn how to be a computer programmer can make more than someone who has a computer science degree and goes to a 4-year college. So the whole world is changing, while those of us who are stuck in the old approach, we're going to continue to be challenged. I think the last thing I'll say on this one is we've got to get to the point where we're not asking our students to go to school and go to college and view it as a chore, but again, part of that lifelong journey. And the way we do that is by changing our approach to educational delivery, the old stand and lecture and deliver approach, where I am the all-knowing content provider as a teacher. I'm lecturing to you, take it down. I might take down what I say, memorize it, regurgitate it back, and then forget it in a month. Those days are gone. the problem solving, the collaboration. Kids have content now. Now we've got to have teachers as guides so they can help kids manage how to use that content as a way to sort of continue to stoke their interest in the learning experience. So I think that so many kids have been programmed to think that education is an end goal, and fundamentally where we're headed is it's lifelong.
So you're the author of a book called Building a Learning Culture in America. And in it, you say that there's a long history of the decline of our learning culture. Can you tell us how far it goes back and how this mess that we have now came to be?
Well, part of it has been as I said, the institutionalization of learning. Keep in mind that our structured school system, the neighborhood school, dividing kids up by age and grade, was all built on the industrialized model that we use in factories, where you put a widget in a box, put people in the assembly line, give them a break. The 9 to 3 schedule in school was based on an agricultural model, so that kids had to end it at 3 so kids could go work in the field before it got dark. Everything was structured with the system in mind. And I'm not criticizing the system. This is the way it was during the Industrial Revolution, not this last century, but the century before that. And so much so that people don't even know, here's a factoid for you, that why you took biology in the 10th grade and chemistry in the 11th and physics in the 12th. No. It was alphabetical, BCP. That's why they did it. There was no rhyme or reason other than they looked and alphabetized the offerings. Everyone's taken algebra in the 9th grade. And your grandparents did, your great-grandparents did, the whole neighborhood school. And so there's this combination of the industrialized approach, and there's this that also relates to the nostalgia and sentimentality of our schooling experience, going to the prom, getting your locker in junior high, the football games, basketball games. And that convergence is made of those sort of realities. It's made it hard for us to break out of it, but break out of it we must. There's nothing wrong with a kid in 7th grade taking algebra, but then that changes the system, and oh no, you got to pull them out of the class and have them do something special. But this new learning culture of the future, I think, should be built around, you give kids what they need, and that way they get what they want. And we have to build learning up, as I said, not a finite goal, but build a national obsession around learning. Make everything we do in terms of our learning experience and the learning journey positively infectious. Build a national obsession around learning like we did years ago, starting with the Kennedy space thrust, or the women's soccer team winning the Olympics. I mean, make learning something more than just, as I say, a load or a chore or a burden to carry to get past a certain degree stage. And then I think we need to take pride in learning, like made in America, and lift up those schools that are doing unique things that most people never know about or hear about, and give them greater attention. One of the things I talked about in the book was this idea of like American Idol. I think we should do that like America's Best Teacher, America's Best School, and have people celebrate what they're doing, have a celebrity panel, hear about what's going on in some of these schools. We need to celebrate the learning journey and make it more engaging for today's kids. And then I also think, and I know this well, Josh knows this because of my political background, unfortunately, the politicization of education has contributed to our overall decline. Right. There's no Republican, Democratic way to teach a kid how to read, write, count, or compete. And I think that when you have in state houses, and I've spoken to tons of governors and legislators, and I was on Obama's education policy committee when he ran the first time. I know Jeb Bush. I've talked to all these folks, and I always say the same message is that, we should not have these party caucuses, waxing in on education policy initiatives in a combative way. I mean, I think education and learning is the one area where we should come together and have one simple yardstick, which I use. I got beat up for it some, but I think I'm very proud of my work. The one yardstick every leader should use who's involved in educational policy making is, will this help a child learn or a group of children learn? If the answer is yes, we should push for it. If the answer is no, we should not. So it's irrespective of what the caucus says, or irrespective of the horse trading that happens in the political dynamics state by state, will this help a child learn? And I think that I have seen people do that on both sides of the aisle and kids benefit. And I've seen some states get drowned and overwhelmed by the politics of the day, which I think is an anathema to the best interest of children.
Kevin, you mentioned the DC stuff. I grew up watching you do your work. So thank you for that in DC. And I think we've got people in DC watching. Can you talk about how we got you here, from the politics to obviously being super passionate about education? I'm not saying it wasn't part of your politics, but I think what we saw you was in Ward 7, and now here you are and you got this passion.
Well, Josh, thank you. I had an interesting journey. I was born in a household, I just talk about it in my book, where there was a learning culture. My father used to have us read. If I asked my father a question, he gave me a book to read, and then we talked about it. And so one of the most proud moments I remember was when I got my own library card, because I could go get the books and talk about it with my father. I didn't know that he was stoking my curiosity at a young age. When I came to Howard Law School and started working in Ward 7 in the Southeast, Northeast DC, that's when I realized, as naive as it sounds, that not everybody had that experience. And it bothered me how so many kids, some of the drug boys I knew on the corner during the crack epidemic, I spent time with them. They were hustling drugs, but they were smart as a whip. And I said, my goodness, this guy, the way they're doing in the drug games, like buying and selling, mergers and acquisitions in corporate America. These guys, they memorize this stuff, they know it, but through no fault of their own, they didn't have that opportunity. So when I joined the council, I didn't join thinking about education. I really joined thinking, Ward 7, we want our fair share. Y'all got a Starbucks in Georgetown, we want Starbucks. You get a new library, new school, we want.
They got more than one Starbucks in Georgetown, I think. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
You know what I mean? But yeah. But Josh, what really changed, and I share this with people. I was a basketball player, I was an All-American basketball player in college. So I used to do these celebrity basketball games. We played against the police. I remind the people of the police, we never lost to the police, okay? Mm-hmm. The fire folks gave us a little run, but we beat the police. We played all these celebrities. And, the radio DJs, Donnie Simpson, all these folks would set up teams. I had a team that did well. And I got a call from the old Lorton prison. And the inmates there said, you're playing everybody, Councilman, why don't you come play us? So I went in there and we played these inmates and we spent time with them. And I realized, I said, wow, some of these guys are bright, and I asked the warden, I said, what kind of educational programs do you have for these young men? I was impressed with some of them, and some of them didn't have violent crimes. They got caught up in the drug stuff, whatever. And he said, Councilman, that'd be a waste of taxpayers' money. 85% of the high school dropouts, and most of them can't read. So there's no need in trying to educate them. And Josh, let me tell you, that changed my life. I said, most of them came from wards 7 and 8. So I would go back and visit all the schools, and then I'd have teachers say, well, we're doing the best we can. And that bothered me, knowing my own experience as a child, and the fact that unwittingly, they didn't even realize that a lot of our leadership was writing off a segment of the population before they even had a chance to flourish and an opportunity to grow. So that's when I got passionate about education. I became a student at what works. I became a student of how you educate children who grow up in trauma and poverty and crime. I was like a sponge. I supported charter schools, but also supported DC public schools. Gave teachers more than they ever had. DC public schools more money than they ever had. We hadn't built a school building in 20 years. I built 10 to 15 of them, or laid the foundation for them. So to me, it really launched me into this work. And when I left office, I just, started writing books and giving speeches and advising governors and mayors. And I started to, Jeb Bush appointed me to this task force on virtual education. I met the folks at then K-12, advised the leadership there, joined the board, and then came in and was running the core business where we're in over 37 states and 8,000 to 10,000 teachers. And, a couple million kids are in our ecosystem of schools we help around the country.
I think that's our cue, Jackie. I think that's our cue to talk online education.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's something Kevin has amazing experience with. So, Kevin, you have a company called K through 12 Inc., which is the nation's largest distributor of online education materials. Yes?
Yes, we do. And it's K-12. Our parent company name is Stride, because not only we're doing K through 12 virtual education, we also are doing adult education and career pathways. But I tell people, this has been a topsy-turvy year and a half because of the pandemic. And the thing about virtual education, online learning, there's a difference between emergency remote learning administered by people who don't know what they're doing and online learning administered by people who do. There are school districts who know what they're doing and do it well, but the vast majority of our school districts have not invested because of budget or whatever, the energy in it, and they were caught unawares during the pandemic. And the other thing about online learning, is not for everybody, but it is available or should be available for anybody. Before the pandemic, most of the kids we got were kids who had some social, economic, or academic challenge. Kids who couldn't thrive in the brick and mortar environment, a lot of special needs kids, autistic kids. Nearly half of the kids, the parents who called us on our enrollment line around the country had kids who were bullied. We also got talented and gifted kids who, like I said, they should have been taking algebra in 5th grade, kids who could work at their own pace. So we had that cross section, and we have athletes and kids who are in the Disney Channel who can't be in a structured classroom. And one of the young women who graduated from our Colorado school won the bronze medal in snowboarding in the Winter Olympics a couple of years ago. She was training all the time. We've had gymnasts, a couple well-known ones. So the online learning before the pandemic was really sort of this hodgepodge of kids who were challenged, kids who were gifted, kids who had work or athletic schedules, and everything changed during the pandemic.
Kevin, you actually had a student that you probably didn't know. His name was Victor. He was one of my students.
Really?
My tutoring company, and he went to BCC, which is a school in Bethesda.
Yeah.
And he was bullied, and he's still a good, dear friend of mine. And his father made a decision, many years ago to use K-12. And Victor and I, when I was starting my tutoring company, we worked very closely. And I'm not gonna say it saved his life, but now he is saving lives. He's actually a paramedic in the DC area. And so, Victor was a product of K-12, and he was one of those kids that didn't fit in.
I'm so proud of that story. I think, and this is not about K-12, me or even you, we've got to meet kids where they are. That should be the ultimate goal of education. And so the traditional school box approach, as I said earlier, doesn't fit every kid, and we lose too many kids. I'm just so proud and excited to hear about Victor's success.
Yeah.
And the pandemic changed things. I've spoken with all the leaders on the Hill that you see on TV, and I spoke to the Biden administration education transition team, and I told them that what we should do, we should offer more options for families in today's kid, because kids respond to a whole array of learning modalities, and we should master the implementation of those modalities to the benefit of kids. And less is not more, more is more. So for school districts to say, we don't want to offer virtual, what I say is, let's incentivize them. Let's say if you train X number or X percentage of your teachers, we'll give you more dollars. And teachers, if they have additional micro-credentialing and virtual education teaching, and they go through a program, and we train a lot of teachers in school districts, 1,000 school districts we train of the 13,000 in America, we'll give you more money. Let's incentivize school districts to have curriculum that can adapt textbooks to the digital format. Another simple thing, so you don't have to do PDFs and parents are trying to figure out what the next lesson plan is. Let's incentivize school districts to have a secure platform so you don't have hackers hacking into school districts' programs. So I think that we almost can, as opposed to the federal government and Department of Education engage in punitive approaches, like we're not going to give you money because y'all haven't done this, or kids haven't, measured up in terms of accountability standards or metrics. Why don't we just incentivize them to do things that ultimately will help kids? You can do it with artificial intelligence, virtual reality, the gamification of education. All this stuff is happening, and in the ed tech world, and enterprise and schools and school districts are doing it. I think we can do more of it. And so I'm glad to hear about Victor's story. There are thousands of stories out there like that. I want to make sure that we grow those numbers even more.
We are. I'm going to do a shameless plug here for ClickTube, which is paying some of my bills. And I love working with the CEO, Dotan. But we are meeting some of these kids who want to study karate or who want to do cooking, might not be able to get out of their house. Maybe they feel bullied. They don't want to go out of their house. We're meeting them here in this way. We've got fantastic instructors. One of the things we talk about is hybrid is here to stay.
Yeah.
And can you talk about how it's okay? It sounds like you're saying it's okay to have in person. Let's just also explore the other options as well.
I'm a big believer in hybrid learning. I think we do primarily fully online, but I think the answer is hybrid, where for hybrid, blended, if I'm sure your listeners know, but where you spend, a couple of days a week in a classroom, a couple of days a week, hybrid. And then your hybrid experience, you can explore a number of things, dual certification programs, dual immersion classes, and you get that reinforcement in the socialization that some people are concerned about when you are in a classroom setting. But there are teachers out there, and there's training out there where teachers can become adept at moving from both the virtual world and the classroom world. By the way, we work with Southern New Hampshire University to create the first of its kind masters in virtual education teaching. And they looked at hundreds of hours of tapes of our teachers. We have the academic efficacy behind it. And part of our focus is that we want to train a whole cadre of young teachers. We've got some strategic partnerships with some HBCUs. We're bringing out some teachers, and we've got a cohort of a couple hundred teachers this last year that are in that master's program. We want to build an army of innovative teachers that can, each one teach one, and then spread it out so that we demystify, Josh and Jackie, we need to demystify what's new. Because I think that the system is so used to, Grace Hopper, that the first legendary female scientist, said the most dangerous phrase in the human language is we've always done it that way. Because she faced so much being a woman interested in space back in the 60s. So, we've got to explode that idea that, well, we've always done it that way. And I'm like, and look, I'm an old guy and I get excited about the new. I mean, I think that's That really is what makes it stimulating. And by the way, these kids love it. Last thing I'll say on this, and I think I mentioned this to Jackie, I'm amazed by the esports phenomenon. I mean, it's over $1 billion industry. They have more viewers than Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, hockey combined. And in our schools, we have these esports league, and you can get, 10,000 kids in an arena, and they're watching 6 other kids play an esports game. Now, initially I'm like, what the heck is this all about? But the thing is, if we're going to, like your friend Victor, if we're going to meet kids where they are, we sure as heck need to understand what that phenomenon is all about and give them opportunities. If that can lead to focus, concentration, problem solving, critical and analytical thinking, which is in short supply in far too many learning environments, and engagement, I'm all for it. Again, will it help a child learn? So yeah, I think these are exciting times. I think that the future is bright, but also think we've got to get out of the way of what the future is offering us.
Wow. You just had a article published in Newsweek in the expert forum, and you were talking there about the changes that you're excited to see happen.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about that? I know you were talking about curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, Jackie, I just feel like we don't know what we don't know, which makes life so much fun. And I did a take on what we call the fourth industrial revolution. So the first industrial revolution was water and steam powered production. That was a big deal in the 1800s. And then the second was electric power to create mass production. So, okay, electricity, that's the next one. The third was sort of the information and electronics age, where you could use that new information technology to automate production. But interestingly, I mentioned this earlier, this fourth revolution, industrial revolution, really is a fusion of all of those things, where technology is going to the next level. It builds on, this fourth revolution builds on the third revolution. And as I said, it's a fusion of the physical, the digital, and the biological spheres. And by that, I mean the advent of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, literally being able to create a world on your computer that feels as real as if you were driving a race car. You feel the bumps, you feel the movement. How we use that to the betterment of society and how we integrate that into the learning process, all of those things is going to explode education and learning as we know it. So how do we get there with today's kids? This is why I mentioned esports, engagement. We have got to meet kids where they are, understand what motivates them. Most of these kids have been digital from birth now, this next generation. And many of us, Josh, as young as you are, even you weren't from birth with this thing here. And it's now, when you have that, there's this confluence of overstimulation that we've got to deal with, but also an incredible comfort level with using technology that people in my generation and 2 or 3 generations past me don't have. I think we have to really focus on problem solving skills. I've probably visited, I don't want to overstate it, but well over 1,000 schools in the world. And when I first started visiting schools, when I was in office, what do you want to be when you grow up? But as I said in that article, what the question, and my friend Jamie Kasop, who's Google's education evangelist in Palo Alto, he said, Kevin, don't ask them that. Ask them what problem they want to solve. So when I go to school, it doesn't matter the age. What problem do you want to solve? What's in your community? What's in your world that you see? And I'm telling you, I've done it so many times now that these kids go on and on and on. And y'all know, you can tell I can talk. I can't even get a word in edgewise when I ask that question to a group of sixth graders or ninth graders or fourth graders. I had in Charleston, South Carolina, this shy little girl said, there's a homeless shelter across the street and they should divert the line differently because I've seen homeless people almost get killed. And me and my sister, we'd like to sign up to help register these kids to go, these homeless folks to go in and get their meals. I mean, the things that come out of young people's mouths because they see the world around them, and we've got to respect their ability to dissect and offer solutions. So problem solving, and then, you know, the team building and collaboration. I think that that's all part of the future. So the article really was designed, Jackie, to tease out what's possible. And, you know, last thing I'll say is I don't want to, it's so easy to interpret some of what I say is a shot or a criticism at what we do and how we do it. But it's not that. It really is a cry out based on hope for what's possible, because I do see what you can do when you free your mind. And by the way, that's really what learning should be all about.
Hey, Kevin, I think we have, so my daughter went to DC public schools. We're not in DC anymore, but obviously our hearts are there. What about the parents? Where do the parents fit in all this?
Yeah,
We talked about politicians, we talked about entrepreneurs and educators. Let's talk about the parents a little bit.
Well, you know, what moved me to support charter schools were parents. When I had a woman, I'll never forget, she was in public house in Southeast DC. And, you know, the union folks told me I should not support charter schools. It was taking money away from public schools. And I didn't know enough about the issues. And at the hearing, the woman said, I don't know much about charter schools, but I heard them talk about some of the ideas here. And she said, I had a son who was entering high school several years ago. And the superintendent said, you know, trust us, we're going to clean up the school and blah, blah, blah. Well, they didn't. He had to walk over drug needles. He got caught up in the life and he's in jail. I've got another kid entering high school. If there are other options that work for this child, I don't want him to walk over those same drug needles. And that testimony just kind of blew me away. So since then, I have been a big believer in the parent voice. Actually, I'm a big believer in the student voice as well. I think that in education policymaking, I've shared this with, I was just speaking with a bunch of governors in Charleston about this. I said, you guys shouldn't make any decision without talking to parents and kids, because in every other instance, we pay attention to the quote unquote end user. But when it comes to education policy, we don't talk to the parents and kids enough. And so I'm a big believer in doing that. And I also think, Josh, that because of the pandemic, parents got their nose under the tent a little bit. They saw what was going on in the classroom. There was some good, there was some bad, there was some ugly. And I think that's going to lead to an explosion of parent voices about what's going on in schools. And I think that's a good thing. And so I'm so glad you raised it, because this idea of parent engagement, and people say, well, parent choice, it's parent choice, but it's more. It really is about how you build a community of learners. You can't build a community of learners without including the end users' voices in a more profound way. So I'm glad you asked that question.
You know, I teach college, Kevin, and there was something in, I think it was in your article, where you said by the year 2030, something like, and help me out with the statistic, 85% of the jobs have not been invented yet.
Yeah, in fact, you know, I can take it even lower than that. The average 5-year-old will work in a job that doesn't exist today. So even when we think about career readiness and the old voc ed concept, and we think about preparing our students for the work world, most of the jobs that they're going to have don't exist. So That's why the skill development can't be tailored to a specific position that we know about. It has to be around the problem solving, the critical thinking, the team building and collaboration, how to acquire knowledge, how to use the content available. I keep lifting up my phone, and manage it and not be distracted or led astray. How you segment out, content in a productive way. I mean, I think that is the big role of teachers going forward. Almost like the Obi-Wan Kenobi, the guy, we need to have these teachers say, direct them. That is the question you should ask.
I mean, how do you do it, Kevin? You're a super smart guy, right? So, and there's so much information out there, and wonderful classes to take and teachers that you can learn from. How do you spend your time learning online?
That's a great question. And please don't ask my wife that, because she thinks I get stuck in my head too much. But I think what I have learned to do when I look at a subject, the first thing I do is I refuse, and I force myself, I refuse to latch on to judgment associated with any subject before I learn about it. I think we're in an either or world right now, and we categorize people and things and places in too many boxes too prematurely. So, when I look at a subject, or even when I hear something, crazy on the news, I try to read about it. I purposely make sure I look at, one side, then another. And then I try to discern, what is really happening here? What's the story behind the story? What are they really talking about? What is the point? And by the way, what is the issue? So that's how I generally approach sort of new, receiving new information. Now, as it relates to, everyday stuff like, we started a garden, my wife and I. She's out there doing this stuff. And, I'm like, okay,
Out there in Vienna.
Yeah, I know. She's out there.
The suburbs.
Yeah, I know. But, it's the same principles, because my father, he grew up on a farm in Aiken, South Carolina. He had a huge garden. He was big into this stuff. I never was into it. So we were talking about this morning. I said, I was reading about, the way tomatoes, I'm like a kid when it comes to new stuff, but I'm also very disciplined about making sure that I saturate myself with as much information as possible about whatever I'm looking at. Then I can figure out how to approach dealing with it. And I think that, and I'm not being critical, in this sort of social media, oh, you said this, I don't like you, or you're over there, blah, blah, blah. I think we're a little too quick. We deal in the superficial. Josh, a quick answer to your question about how I operate, I dig deep. I mean, just by instinct. I'd never stop with the superficial knowledge. I mean, I'm always like, all right, what's that? What's that? Or what does that mean? Where did that come from? And I find I have a more rounded view, at least for me. It works for me.
You guys teach gardening on K-12?
Yeah, well, actually, we've got some incredible agricultural pathways.
I bet.
And it's interesting how some pathways are more attractive to certain regions. And in the South, the agricultural pathways are big. And through automation, through technology, through, artificial intelligence, just in terms of how you lay out your crops and how you set the watering schedule and the harvesting schedule, you can automate all that. And to see these young people begin to embrace that and work through it, it's not like the old, Farmer John image where you get out there and everybody, you do that, but you do it in a more structured, strategic way, because you have the benefit of all this other information and data in your resources. So most of the work is done on a computer screen. We're introducing these career pathways to middle schoolers, and they're loving it, because even if they don't finish that pathway, again, it stokes that curiosity, and they keep going on because they find that, wow, this stuff is really cool. So that's something that's very exciting. There are so many ways you can sort of engage kids and keep their interest.
So Kevin, are you saying that you're inspiring these kids through the computer screen?
Yes, we are. And, you know, the other thing we're doing, we're integrating the old with the new. As I said, I visited so many of our schools. One of our Arizona schools, I was with the math teacher who, she was so excited to share this story with me. Because I'm always asking our teachers, share me your success stories, share me your challenges. She pulled me aside after I spoke to about 40 of our teachers. And she said, I got, you know, this gamification, they put some gamification into the math stuff. You reach a certain level, you get a badge, you get a star, blah, 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 blah. And she said, this 14-year-old kid who it was hard to reach and he was struggling with math. And she got him got him involved with some of the gamification in math. And he sent her an email at 1 a.m. said, I reached the next level. Where's my badge? You know, you haven't got me my badge. Now she's asleep, but you know, this kid was so into making sure he got to that next level, like the video games, he got there, he wanted that badge. And so this idea of, we have another thing we call the recommender button, which is amazing to see where you can tell a kid when they're reading at their pace, it slows down and then it speeds up. And Josh, you probably heard of this, but our recommender button, what it does is if a kid gets stuck, then there's a pop-up and this animated, oh, it looks like so-and-so, let me tell you more about this. And it helps answer questions the kid may have, which we know through the data are the usual questions that happen at this passage because most kids get stuck here. So, I mean, there's all this really cool stuff to help guide kids along the way through technology. And again, it's not a replacement for the human interaction, but it helps them when they're in their sort of self-teaching mode or homework mode. And it's a whole different ballgame.
Kevin, I had an experience last night with my daughter, 6.5, 6 3/4, she would say. And she's on the iPad, she's doing her math. And she got this new program that she's using, and she's getting all these points. And I asked her, so what are you going to do with all those points? She just looked at me and she just looked away. And I don't think she knows what she's going to do with them, but she loves getting
Doesn't matter.
She's loving math. She's loving it. She's loving it. She's got math in school. She's got a teacher who's engaging her. That's awesome. And then she's practicing at home and she's loving it as well. So
isn't that great though? Isn't that the way it should be? It broke my heart, when I was in office and I'd go to school and I'd see a kid in the 3rd grade and 2 or 3 years later, I saw him in the 7th grade and that light was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And they hated school and they were hanging out. And so during those critical periods, what should we be doing differently? How can we engage them? Again, I keep saying, meet them where they are. And, there are things out there we can do. But we have to be willing to do them. And I think this country, that's why I talk about inflection point. I'm a big history buff. And this idea of the force of will, the belief system, we have to have a fundamental belief that all kids can learn. And some people don't. Some people say, well, some kids, they come from background. No, but as a country, all kids can learn. It has to be in our DNA, our core, that all kids can learn. Every kid can learn. We have to believe that. And then we also have to be committed to treating every kid we teach like we're teaching our own kid. It's sort of a constitutional construct, if you will, that this is sort of the mindset you had to have. Now, I'm a big believer in force of will, that you can do this. We can do this. And, I remember, reading about Churchill, I'm a big fan of his, that when the bombs were all, Germany was bombing London and people in London were like, oh, we're going to be, and he said, look, vision is seeing beyond what you can see. Do not pay attention to these bombs right now. We are going to overcome this. And literally, he had that belief. And I want us to have that same belief about the power of learning for every child, that we can do this. And But to do it, you got to work smart, you got to work hard, you got to be strategic, and you got to be open to new. And so that's where I come from. And I just love hearing stories like talk about your daughter. I mean, I've got a 5-year-old granddaughter, and you know, she's time enough for me. She said, you know, Grandpa, look, this is what we're going to do today. She's got a schedule, and I'm like, okay,
you do
it. You know, I had something else in mind, but I guess we're going to do your schedule. I'm good.
Let me ask you one last question. I'll put you on the spot a little bit here. So yes, the kids can learn online, in person. What about you? You know, in terms of online learning. So my parents are taking classes online. My parents are in Rockville, Maryland. They don't get out too much, but they are taking classes online. They're meeting their friends online. What about you? Taking classes online?
I'm not taking any classes right now, but I will. I'm very much open to it. I monitor so many of the classes we offer our kids. I mean, literally the curriculum, you know, working through. That's why I can speak about like the recommender button and, you know, reading level. In fact, I engaged in the unboxing exercise where we ship every child that we have in our system a computer. So I went through the exercise of opening up the computer box and logging on, and I had to call IT for help. You know, I must say.
Did they pick up?
Yeah, they picked up, and it was like, you know, it's like I'm having a problem here. So I'm a big believer in that. I will be taking class on. You know what class I want to take online?
Bring it.
I hate to admit it. You've got a weak. You're going to know about one of my weaknesses. I just don't take well to foreign language, and I want to take Spanish online, and I'm committed to doing that. That will be my next one.
You do that, and then you come and visit. All right, I got a place for you to visit. If you hold up your end of the bargain, I'll hold up at mine.
I will do that, Josh. You're on. It's on like popcorn, my friend.
Let's do it. I got port down here, like we talked about online. You come down here, and we'll speak our crappy Spanish and drink port.
Well, now you're on. I will follow up.
See, so Kevin and Josh, this has been a marvelous conversation about how wonderful these innovations in learning could be and teaching. So in order to bring about this change, Kevin, what do we have to do? Is it teacher training? What is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, you know, we think globally, we act locally. It's similar to that old Greenpeace expression. While a lot of these ideas, you know, have cachet in an esoteric way, you know, national obsession around learning, building a national learning culture, keeping it positive, that literally it's community by community. And I think one of the first things we need to do is those parents who are now getting engaged and putting together learning pods and learning hubs, I think that we need to coalesce that around some appraisal of what's going on in each classroom for every child and what we can do differently. The other thing that I've suggested to superintendents, that each school superintendent in every district in America should do two things. One, they should look at three things that they have been doing historically and stop doing them. And then two, they should try three new things they've never done before and start that. In corporate America, they have the R&D, research and development arm. I think every school district should have some form of that. If you fund it with $20,000 or $2 million, you know, every school district should be pushing toward exploring what's new out there and pilot it in some form or fashion. And that's why I love the idea of committing. You're going to stop doing something and you're going to start doing something new. I think that these schools that are doing innovative work, like you should read about the Lindsay School District in Lindsay, California. They created what I would call an incredible learning culture. It was the lowest performing school district in the state for many years. I spent some time there and featured them in that book, building the last school I mentioned in my book. They've completely turned it around by having a student-centered approach. So, and the last thing to answer your question, I think everything we do needs to be student-centered. And I actually think when you build school budgets, we should start from scratch, and we fund it from the end user out. So the most important two people in a classroom is the teacher and the student. So you start with funding. What do we need for this teacher to be able to provide the support for this student in the classroom? And what does the student need to make sure that they're able to appreciate and learn from the teacher who's their new guide, and build it out. And anything that's extraneous that doesn't relate to those two most important variables, we shouldn't do, or it should be low priority. Because if you dissect how schools spend money, and I know this, I oversaw DC budget for years, there are so many ancillary things that really have nothing to do with those two dynamics, the teacher.
Like what?
Well, the assistant to the deputy of curriculum development. Do we really need that? You see what I mean? I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but the deputy facilities manager who's in charge of overseeing the roof repair contract. School districts sort of have been used to filling slots that have been in existence for 50 years. And I don't know if you need, 40 people in a school district to oversee curriculum. I don't know, maybe you do, but I would better define their roles so that you know that what they're doing will have some direct impact, or at least tangential impact, to that learning experience between the student and the teacher. I know that sounds overly simplistic, and school district superintendent, well, you don't understand. I said, yeah, I actually do. And that's why I say the starting point is find 2 or 3 things you can stop doing. They're there. I guarantee you, if you have a multi-million-dollar, in some school districts like LA, New York, multi-billion-dollar school, you're going to tell me that there aren't 3 things you can stop doing that really have nothing to do with what's going on in the classroom for students? So I think that approach is the most, realistic way to get people to think differently. Because at the end of the day, the way we get there is to inject, what's worked in the old with what we need to think about with the new.
Well, you had brought up the concept of having a vision before, and what you're describing now to bring about that change really sounds like to me is vision.
Well, I'm so brutally honest with myself. I know I don't have all the answers, but because I am, like when they talk about basketball players are gym rats, they practice all the time. Well, I'm that guy when it comes to this work. I know, I'm not even comparing myself. I know this space. I love this work, and I love what's possible for kids. So I do know that there are things we could do if we break away from our tendency to just do what we've always done. And that, to me, if there's that willingness to really push the envelope and break out of the paradigm of the sameness of what we do, I think we can work magic. And that's why I think this is an incredible time. I think the sad reality of the pandemic is there's a global reset on many levels. And I think in education, teaching and learning, we're experiencing that same reset.
Well, change is never comfortable, is it?
No, it's
But
not.
what
No.
comes out on the other end is so much better.
Yeah. I just am excited. I'm excited for my granddaughter. I'm excited for Josh's daughter. I'm excited for Victor. I'm excited for that kid I mentioned, 14-year-old in Arizona. I'm excited for every kid that breaks away and it defies the expectations of what has been placed on them. And I'm excited for America's future. These kids are going to clean up the mess that we've created. But the only way they're going to do that is to feel the engagement associated with embracing learning. So,
And I'm excited for you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Growing up watching you, on the council, and then you're doing this. It's so cool to see, how passionate you are about your job now and what you're doing. So I truly appreciate you answering that cold email and coming on.
Well, I know what you're doing. I'm really, really honored by what you are doing, Jackie, what you're doing. And I'm not just saying that. Anyone who devotes themselves to uplifting, our young folks and doing cool new stuff in education, and they're doing great work. And so thanks for reaching out. I hope that people understand where I'm coming from. I can tell you right now, people are asking me, well, what are you running for? I'm running for nothing. I'm running for my life. I want to make sure, I want to make sure that whatever seeds I'm planting now, it's really to pave the way for those that are coming past me, because the future is so bright and we just need to embrace it.
Ooh, that's amazing, Kevin. You're such an optimistic do-gooder.
Well, I am optimistic. I really am. And I've seen a lot of pain. One of the toughest jobs I had was in the council in the middle of the drug wars and going to funerals where the casket was this big, the drive-bys in the 90s. It was tough. But I do think that, there's meaning behind all that happens. And, we just have to learn and grow from it. And I think that, I think there's some really great stuff in the offering for humanity if we just, get out of our own way.
Well, I think you've touched upon some amazing points today about the future of learning. And Josh, you brought up online opportunities. And I wish we had more time. We don't. I wanted to talk a little bit more about teacher training.
Yes.
And how that can help bring the change along. But perhaps in a future webcast, we can do that too.
I'd love to do that. I have strong thoughts about that. And I have a lot of respect for teachers. And I would urge them not to be afraid to learn and grow. Because I think many teachers feel, I can't do that. And I've heard teachers who online, I can't do it. I say, yes, you can. Yes, you can. We'll help you. We'll incentivize you. We'll help you. You don't have to worry about it. And I think that we need to empower teachers by professionalizing teachers. Give them additional resources, give them additional money, but give them professional development where they're not just sitting in a room and looking at a videotape, which is what a lot of schools do. More hands-on training. And so, yeah, I'd love to talk about that. I've got 8,000 to 10,000 teachers that work at our company, and I've spent a lot of time with them. And most of them are on their mission-oriented folks. They're doing it because they love what they do. But I think we can help take them to the next level. And this is last thing I'll say, Jackie. We need to get out of the political sort of political double talk about, I want to support education, more money for teachers. No, we don't need to hear that. I mean, let's actualize it by actually spending time with teachers so they don't have to spend money, their own money for classroom supplies. Let's help professionalize them, giving them more resources. And then let's ask them to help self-police, because every teacher you talk to will say that so-and-so in the next classroom doesn't know what the heck they're doing. And so, I've told Randy Weingarten, I said, look, let's self-police, just like lawyers have a panel of lawyers that disbar bad lawyers and doctors do the same thing. Let's have teachers do that, and I think a lot of teachers would embrace that, because there are some teachers that shouldn't be teaching. Most of them are doing great, and all of them could do better if they had the support and the professional development that they need.
I'm with you there. I am with you 1,000% there. So anyway, this has been such an enlightening conversation, and it's actually inspired me and giving me hope for the future. And I'll look forward to walking into my class tomorrow morning.
Good for you.
Yeah.
You
So
did it, Kevin.
anyway,
You did it. You keep doing it, Kevin.
Well, thank you, Josh. I appreciate you, man. And, I appreciate the love, and I appreciate the support. And more than that, I appreciate that you've laid down the marker that you're going to make a difference in education and technology. So keep on doing that.
Thank you.
yay. Well, we've run out of time. I'm so sorry, gentlemen. Perhaps in the future, there will be another.
Well, we're going to be drinking port in Mexico, so you gotta catch up with us down
Okay.
here.
Well,
I love it.
I'm
Count
coming
me-
over, but I'm bringing my own Chardonnay. So,
Okay.
so anyway, gentlemen,
We'll be like Snoop Dogg in the Corona commercials, right?
here we
You
go.
and me.
Oh my God, we're such good influence on these children that we're teaching. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much.
Bye.
Be well. Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
Thank you.